Today, we're jumping straight into a really interesting discussion. It comes from Alex and Jamie on the Unfiltered Minds podcast.
That's right. Their episode, Ego, Anger, and Not Being Cool.
Yeah.
Really good stuff in there.
Yeah, so we've kind of pulled apart their conversation to explore these, well, these really connected ideas, ego, anger, and that whole feeling of wanting to be, cool.
Mm-hmm. And our goal here is to give you a clearer lens on these things, maybe offer some different ways to think about them or navigate them.
Exactly, because let's face it, these are universal experiences, right? We all deal with this stuff.
We really do. But we don't often stop to, unpack why. What's actually driving that anger or that need to seem cool?
So this deep dive is about getting into the mechanics of it all. Think of it as a shortcut, maybe,
Right.
to understanding these pretty powerful internal forces.
Right. A streamlined guide, if you will.
Okay, so let's start with the ego. Alex had this great description. What was it, that sneaky little voice?
Yeah, that's the one. The voice that's always focused on being right, needing respect, making sure you look competent.
That really landed with me. I mean, especially with the pressure these days to always be informed, not feel overwhelmed. It feels like understanding that voice is, well, step one.
It absolutely is. You could think of it as the part of us that's really invested in maintaining a certain self-image, a positive one, hopefully.
Right, and Alex's description nails how that shows up day to day, that
Mhm.
sort of need for validation from outside.
And Jamie then makes that vital link, like what happens when that self-image gets, threatened or feels
Through
challenged?
anger, Jamie points out it's almost this automatic reaction when the ego feels like it's been slighted.
Mm-hmm.
They use that coffee example, ordering almond milk, getting oat milk instead.
Mm-hmm.
Seems so minor, right? But it can cause this real surge of irritation. You ever feel that?
Yeah.
That flash over something tiny?
Oh, definitely. And it seems trivial, the milk type, but if you dig a bit,
Yeah.
it's maybe not just the preference.
What do you mean?
Well, it could be about feeling unheard, maybe, or feeling like your choice doesn't matter. The ego can read that as disrespect.
Okay. So the anger isn't really about the oat milk versus the almond milk.
Not entirely, perhaps. It's the ego's defense kicking in, which leads nicely into the next point they made.
Which is that both ego and anger often stem from fear.
Exactly. Alex kind of lays it out. The ego's scared of being wrong, looking weak, being judged.
And anger becomes the defense mechanism. Alex called it a shield made of glass. I loved that image.
It's so vivid, isn't it? Because it captures that paradox. It's meant to protect.
But it often just makes things worse. Makes you look, well, messy.
Messy, yeah. Or as Jamie put it, kind of uncool. It
Yeah.
backfires. Because it's reactive, not, a measured response. It often just escalates things.
Right, which undermines the very security the ego is trying to protect in the first place.
Precisely.
And speaking of uncool, they really hit on that idea that people think showing ego or anger makes them look powerful.
Yeah, Jamie was pretty blunt about that, saying it's actually the opposite. It signals instability. Not cool at all.
The James Bond example they used was perfect. Totally calm, under immense pressure. That's what reads as genuinely cool.
That contrast is key, isn't it? The appearance of power versus the reality of maybe insecurity underneath, someone always flying off the handle or needing to be right.
Yeah, doesn't scream strong and stable, does it?
Yeah.
True composure, like Bond, it comes from somewhere else. Inner control.
Inner control, emotional regulation, doesn't need the outward show.
And then Jamie dropped that line.
Yeah.
Wow, anger is like drinking poison and hoping the other person gets sick.
Oof, yeah. That cuts deep, doesn't it? Really shows how self-destructive it is.
Totally. Alex even talked about having these full-on imaginary arguments in his head
Uh-huh, we've all done that.
and realizing, wait, I'm the only one suffering here. The other person probably has no idea. Ever catch yourself doing that? Replaying stuff.
Absolutely, and that analogy just hammers it home. The anger might feel like it's aimed outward, but mostly it just brings up your own energy, your own headspace.
It really makes you think, like, how much time and energy do I waste on that? On stuff that ultimately only affects me?
It's a great question to ask ourselves, which ties into their whole point about shifting from just reacting.
To actually responding.
Right. Yeah.
That they talked about emotional maturity, being like feeling the anger or whatever it is.
Uh-huh.
Feeling it.
But then pausing.
Yeah.
Observing it. And choosing how to act instead of just letting that ego trigger run the show.
Yes. That's the core difference. Reaction is automatic, almost unconscious, driven by old patterns, ego defenses.
Whereas a response
Yeah.
that has thought behind it, awareness.
Exactly. It involves that conscious moment, that pause, allowing for a more intentional choice. That's, a huge part of emotional intelligence.
They even called it next level cool, which, I don't know, kind of appeals to that desire for growth, right?
It does. It reframes maturity as something aspirational, not just stodgy. So how do we actually do that? Cultivate that ability to respond. They had some practical tips. Alex mentioned journaling.
Yeah, he said when he felt angry, he'd write it down, what happened, but also what was really going on.
I often found the ego was mixed up in it somewhere.
Seems so. It helped him spot the triggers, the patterns, and Jamie's suggestion was meditation.
Right. Even just like 5 minutes.
Yeah, short bursts. Just to get better at noticing the thoughts and feelings as they pop up.
Before they completely take over.
Exactly. It's not about stopping the feelings. It's about creating that space between the feeling and the reaction. So you can choose.
Both seem pretty doable, actually. Not like some massive undertaking. Journaling, a few minutes of quiet.
They're simple, direct tools. Journaling for reflection, meditation for that mindful awareness, observing the internal weather without getting swept away.
I like that internal weather. Okay, they also talked about sometimes pretending to be cool. Like that can be its own ego thing.
Oh, for sure. Like putting on a front, a mask to hide insecurities.
Yeah, this fake calm versus what they called real cool, which involves being okay with, like, admitting mistakes or saying your feelings were hurt.
Vulnerability, essentially, which the ego often sees as weakness, but is actually a strength. If you notice that difference, someone trying way too hard versus someone just comfortable.
Totally. The effort shows, doesn't it? The fake cool feels brittle.
It does, because it's about protecting an image. Real cool, like they said, comes from being okay with yourself, flaws and all. It's authentic.
Jamie said real is rare, which is true.
Very true. And that authenticity, that real cool, they linked it to being grounded, being kind.
Right. People who are genuinely secure don't seem to need to prove anything all the time. They're not constantly asserting themselves.
Exactly. That constant need to prove, it often comes from a place of not quite accepting yourself. Whereas being grounded, being kind, that suggests an inner peace. Doesn't need the external thumbs up.
It makes you think, how often are my actions about genuine connection versus maybe subtly just needing to feel validated or right?
It's a worthwhile reflection, recognizing when the ego is trying to hijack the moment, as they put it.
Yeah, making it all about self-preservation instead of the actual situation. So Alex and Jamie kind of left us with this challenge, didn't they?
It did. A very practical one.
Next time you feel that anger, that irritation flaring up, just pause.
Yeah, take a breath.
And ask, honestly, is this really about the thing that just happened? Or is it more about my ego feeling poked somehow?
Such a simple question, but potentially game-changing. That pause, that question, it interrupts the automatic pilot.
Creates that space for a different choice.
Exactly. A more thoughtful, constructive way forward.
So boiling it down, the real takeaway seems to be that genuine coolness isn't about looking tough or being right. It's internal.
It really is. Inner calm, self-awareness, recognizing the ego's tricks, seeing anger for the, well, often counterproductive thing it is.
And developing that emotional intelligence to respond with purpose, not just react out of fear or needing to protect that fragile self-image.
Well put. It's about intention over impulse.
Okay, so here's a final thought for everyone listening, something that really stuck with me from their chat. Think about how often our reactions, maybe big blow-ups, maybe just small spikes of annoyance, how often are they really driven by that need to protect our ego?
Rather than the issue itself.
Exactly. And what could change in your life, your work, your relationships, if you consciously tried to shift from that ego-driven reaction?
Towards a more mindful response.
Yeah. Prioritizing that pause, that awareness, over just letting the anger or the ego take the wheel. Definitely something to chew on.